Good. Right, welcome everyone. If this is your first talk or show, welcome to the festival tomorrow. But hopefully some of you had a chance to look around and see everything else on offer. I'd like to really, I think we're really kind of, we're blessed here in Swindon in many ways, but particularly I feel like I'm blessed to have Ottoline back, and so I'd like to welcome. This is the third year you've been here.
Yeah.
And it's just, I think it's, yeah, we're really grateful. So it's really lovely to have you back here again. It's a real honour for us, I think. So thank you for coming back. Just to set the scene as well, so UK Research Innovation, which we'll obviously touch on a fair bit, they've just published their new 5-year strategy fairly recently, which is called Transforming Tomorrow Together. Which sounds a lot like the name of our festival. Not saying anything, but yeah. So I think what I'd like to try and do is use this event to unpack that a little bit more, which does mean that I shouldn't be asking all the questions for a start, because together is bigger than me. So I will try and leave space for questions at the end. But if there's something burning, yeah, let me know. And we've got a roving mic. So I do want to unpack what that means, particularly what the word together means. But in terms of ambition, but also in practice what it means. Because together, it's kind of nice and warm and touchy-feely, but, what do you really mean that? Before we
by collecting up those quite dilute resources from the environment, unlike us who go for the really concentrated ones. So we go to find the concentrated ones. They collect up these very dilute ones. Big surface area, particularly big underground surface area for the water and the mineral nutrients, so can't move. As soon as you can't move, that creates all kinds of challenges for you. Primarily that you can't go away from a poor environment into a better one. So you've got to adapt to the environment in which you're growing. So you have to be able to then make those resource decisions very effectively. So if you're in an environment that has relatively limited mineral nutrients, for example, then the resource you want to invest in your roots at the expense of your shoots. If you've got plenty of those mineral nutrients, but it's a bit shady, then you want to invest in your leaf surface area at the expense of your roots. So how they do that, how they make those decisions, really tricky. Precisely, and the solution is fundamentally about modularity. It's about the fact that they build themselves out of parts, so, like a leaf and a bit of stem and another growing tip in the shoot. And you can make as many or as few of those parts as you like, depending on the environment. So from the point of view of your shoot, you can be a single unbranched stem or a massively ramified bush. And how you decide which of those little growing tips should be active and make a branch and which shouldn't has got to depend on all that information, and you've got to make that integrated decision. Now, the other problem you have, though, as an immobile organism, sitting duck. Anything can destroy you, including, a slug, for example. Everyone who has a garden knows the devastating impact of slugs. I personally don't find slugs all that threatening. They don't move very fast, yes.
No. Okay.
They don't move very fast. They're not that hard to get away from. But if you're a plant, so that means that decision-making process, in fact, your overall growth and that modularity gives you another huge advantage, which is no unique parts. So the slug can eat more or less any bit, and there's another bit, and indeed a system to replace the bit that you've lost. But from a decision-making point of view, that means you have to do it in a distributed way. You can't have a brain. So if you're a plant, having a brain is an incredibly stupid idea, because one slug and you've had it, exactly.
Yeah, there's a whole show we should do on that, I think.
Absolutely. So then you've got this extraordinary organism building itself out of thin air, deciding where to invest its resources by adding or not modules, making those decisions without any central processing. And the thing that really fascinates me is that distributed processing, how you make sensible decisions at a whole organism level, taking into account both local and global information. It's very beautiful, and that's what I worked on, all kinds of signalling systems in plants that allow them to do that.
I wasn't expecting quite such a full answer, but that was amazing.
Unfortunately, that's something I could talk about for years.
I think the thing is, with scientists, people are just passionate about it. And I don't know if it's deliberate. I'm guessing it is deliberate, but maybe it's not. When you start, I just thought you were working up a metaphor then. Was that on purpose? So essentially we started with transforming tomorrow together.
Yeah.
And basically you then described how a plant transforms its future is tomorrow together.
Absolutely.
As a distributed model with no single brain.
Totally.
So yeah, if that wasn't deliberate, then that's bizarre. But I suspect it was. So I do want to get back into the big picture of, okay, what's UKRI? Just a quick show of hands, actually. How many people feel like they've got a good understanding? I want you to put your hand up on this side, so your left hand over here, if you think I know everything there is to know about UKRI. Thank you very much. Here, if I've never heard of UKRI, what the hell are you talking about? And anywhere in between. So this is your range. Over here, if you know everything. Over there, if you know nothing. That was what I said? Yeah, kind of. Okay, so it's mostly over here, isn't it? Mostly over here. Can we run VT? We've got a very, very short little introduction video, which we'll then criticise. Is there sound? Have we got sound? I can see him squirreling away, going, we should have sound.
It's got subtitles.
It has got subtitles as well, you see, but not the emotional stuff. Yeah, you need the music to drive the emotion of the video.
We are at one of the most important and exciting times in the history of research and innovation in the UK. The rate of discovery and technological advance is astonishing, with unprecedented opportunities to create value for society and the economy. This is a new industrial revolution, driven by technological change. At the same time, there are major challenges as we tackle the unintended consequences of the first industrial revolution, from the environmental impacts of fossil fuels to the health impacts of sugar. These are complex and demanding challenges, but the new industrial revolution presents major opportunities to address them and to enrich and improve lives in the UK and around the world.
Thank you very much. It's not a very long video, but I still cut it short. You can refer to the video if you like. So it's a new video and it's got your name on it, really. But just briefly then, it's not as interesting as plants, but can you briefly explain what UKRI is, what it does? And it's here in Swindon, so we should have some idea.
Absolutely. So it's still a relatively new organisation. We're coming up to our 5th birthday. And we are an organisation that has brought together 9 pre-existing organisations. And they are the so-called research councils who have focused on funding research and innovation associated with a particular discipline, from the arts and humanities through to the engineering and physical sciences and everything else. Plus an organisation called Research England, which funds the block grants into English universities, and there are equivalent bodies in the devolved administrations that do that in Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Plus Innovate UK, which is the UK's innovation agency that supports businesses, innovative businesses. So all of that together in one organisation allows us to make those connections, you know, if I'm going to use my plant analogy, so that we can really join the system up fully to create a research and innovation system that reaches its full potential in the UK and really delivers both locally, nationally and indeed globally to tackle some of these big challenges in the context of creating societies, environments, worlds where people feel empowered, feel that they have some agency to make things better. I think fundamentally that's what research and innovation is about. It's about the opportunity to do good, to add value, to make things better. And that has got to be a collective opportunity that we're all striving for together, not an activity that goes on over there in a shiny building with test tubes and things like that. That's part of the opportunity we have is to shift how research and innovation are viewed across our society, and particularly inside the research and innovation community, so that everybody has that more together feeling. Together is really important. These are scary challenges. We can tackle them together if we feel like we've got to tackle them individually, they become a little bit overwhelming. So there are many, many reasons why together is so important in our strategy tagline.
So what does that mean? So I'm not a scientist. I've done science, but I don't work in science. What does together mean for me or for people? How many people are scientists or work in the science field? It's kind of a small minority. So they are together already working to solve challenges and save the world. But what does it mean for the rest of us in practice?
So again, it's a multi-scale thing. So when it says together, it absolutely means everybody, but it also means more than the person wearing the white coat locally. So the idea that to be contributing to science, you're the person wearing the white coat, I think is deeply problematic. You can't do it without a very large number of other people who are actively contributing an integral part of the system that allows us to deliver. And that includes technical expertise, but also all kinds of administrative expertise to manage the budgets. And the institute I was directing in Cambridge before I took this job, absolutely critical person was the security guard on reception, who was just lovely. And you go in the morning and you get that kind of sunny welcome, and it just changes the whole atmosphere of the place, and the way you work is then. So I really mean everybody who works in any way that contributes to the endeavour is a critical part of that endeavour, and that's important for the kind of culture of the work environment as well, that everybody feels that they're contributing and that they're working together. And so the people who are, stuck at the sharp, pointy end of some really tricky problem feel like they're really well supported rather than isolated and by themselves. So for those people, together is important. And then, if you go to somebody who doesn't think of themselves as having anything to do with it, nonetheless, their feeling of agency, as we've talked about before, is critical. And there are so many of these huge problems that actually require everybody to be engaged in, how many plastic bags you use, all of those things. Everybody can do something. And with these big problems, that's essential. It's got to be everybody doing something. It's got to be that kind of shared endeavour. And then, beyond that, that shared endeavour brings people together and also creates the kinds of societies where, again, we feel that we can tackle our problems. And that it just drives that kind of nation of innovators loop that I think we need to move things forward and shift the narrative that we have quite often as a country about kind of doom and gloom. There are scary things out there, but we can do something about it.
Yeah. I always bring back the example of I don't know if people are sick of hearing about it, the pandemic. Does anyone remember that? But it was really interesting to watch science happening in real time. And at the beginning, we got the scientists going, it's a new virus. We don't know much about it, but based on other viruses, this is what we think it will behave like. And then as the data came in, it changed. And there's people going, scientists don't know anything. They keep changing their mind. But actually, yeah, they do, because they get more information. And we got to watch that scientific process happen. Yep. But the challenge of keeping people involved in that and feeling like this is their science and they understand it and they're on board with the challenge, rather than being told what to do by politicians or scientists on podiums, was difficult, from a communication perspective. So, that kind of getting people as close as possible to, the understanding how it all works.
Yeah.
And beyond that kind of idea, like you said, of a shiny building and then pronouncements from inside it.
Yeah.
That feels like a lot of where the challenge is to me.
And I do think that's a good example in the context of transforming tomorrow together, because the pandemic was something that was absolutely tackled collectively. It was together. Everybody had to do things. They had to give things up in their lives, and then everybody was also very kind of proactive and engaged in things like the vaccine rollout from the people in the shiny labs who made the vaccine. I very powerful memory for me going to get my first shot in Cambridge, and the fantastic volunteers on the door kind of ushering you into the centre and walking through. It was absolutely a shared endeavour to beat this thing. And it's been very interesting, again, working with government across that, because so many things were doable in the context of this absolute, very clear, singular priority. And it illustrates what you can do. Trying to do that kind of thing without the singular priority is a very interesting challenge we have now, because we want to be working in that collective way that creates that kind of shared endeavour. But at the same time, there are so many things that we need to do, and you can't point at the thing and say everyone has to down tools and do that anymore. You have to work in a way that balances. So, we're back to plants and distributing their resources.
Yeah.
So how you do that well is critical. And to me, that's another key reason why it has to be together, because I need to understand what other people's priorities are, properly understand that in order to think about how we distribute the resources that we have as an agency, for example.
Yeah, okay. And one of the, this I guess is different roles thing, but something I think you've got some fairly strong views on. But in Swindon we've got really high employment levels, or very low unemployment. But we've got some real areas of need in the town. We've got some incredibly low access to higher education statistics for a lot of Swindon. And we tend to have to bring people in with degrees, and anyone who's an employer here will tell you if they're needing science engineers, they have a real problem with recruitment. And so we've got this great population with lots of skills, but they're not able to get these jobs. But we bring people from outside. University, I've got one at university, and I've got one who I think isn't currently planning to go to university. How do we what do you think we should be doing about skills, getting people into science, getting people the right skills, or into the industries where we need them, or essentially giving them that agency, really? Because I think Swindon, I never, when we talk about science, talk about raising aspirations, because frankly it's patronising. And actually there's kids who want to be Premier League footballers. That's a pretty high aspiration. So it's more about broadening aspirations, really, and showing the range of things we could do. So where do you sit in that whole skills debate, and how we should be helping the population of Swindon, for example, or working with?
I think another important element to all of this is, as it said in the movie, the rate of change is very high now. Here I am sitting here with this thing. I have no idea what I'd have thought of this if somebody had handed this to me when I was 10. So things are moving incredibly quickly, and so the skills agenda is actually a lifelong agenda. I think that's the first thing to say. So everywhere, everybody will be learning in an exciting way their entire lives, which is great. That to me also then creates the opportunity to dismantle a little bit our very constrained view of how we think about training. So particularly in the academic domain where I kind of grew up, my career is you go to school, you go to university, and then you kind of never leave. It's a very linear kind of pathway, and it's actually very unhelpful. And things like the diversity of various kind of groups across that pathway is not good, and it tends to drop as you go along it. And the solution people tend to reach for is how you can kind of cram more people in on the front end of that, whoever they are, and kind of force them through the funny doors that we've put along it.
So more in the top of the funnel, and they'll get through. Is that?
We've got to stop thinking about these linear pathways, because that isn't how we're going to lead our lives anymore. We've got to have way more career path diversity and way more kind of dipping in and out of skills engagement along the way. So yes, universities are wonderful, and anybody who feels excited and engaged and wants to go to university should definitely have the opportunity to do that, and they should have the opportunity to do that when they're 18 and when they're 28 and when they're 38. But at the same time, there need to be more routes into those highly skilled jobs than just that. And there used to be, and it's reappearing, those kind of apprenticeship routes where you really gain the technical skills, and then you build those, on-the-job technical skills, and then maybe you can develop those further into a more active research role. You can imagine so many exciting careers taking those opportunities as they come up, and I think that's how we kind of need to think about it. rather than how we deal with kind of deficits in the current system, if you see what I mean. You change the system to bridge the deficits rather than force people into the current system.
So the problem is not there's not enough people doing this thing that we think they should do.
Yeah.
It's actually we need to just look at the whole thing differently, find different ways.
Yeah.
No, that's interesting. If my son's here, can take note. Have you got a question? Oh, that others. You're the wrong son. You are at university. You're doing STEM at university, you know. But interestingly, you didn't want to go. So there you go. I've got a question.
Hi, Ottoline. Thanks for your talk so far. I just had a question about how we could better work together with industry to solve some shared challenges. I'm sorry if you've already talked about that. We missed the start of the talk. But perhaps you could just talk a little bit about the opportunity, because the British science and technology sphere is very strong in the industrial space as well. Where do you see that in the sort of next 5 to 10 years, where perhaps the biggest opportunities for us could be?
Absolutely. So I think that's a critical point to remember. We have a fantastic university base, which I've mentioned a bit, but of course the majority of research and innovation goes on in industry. It's 2/3 plus, and we'd like it to be more, because the high innovation-led industries are the ones that have the highest productivity and a lot of the more kind of high-quality jobs that are long-term and all the rest of it, and they create additional value and growth in the economy, and then that can support our public services, and and it all goes round in a cycle. We need to get those positive cycles going. So I completely agree with you that the opportunity we have, and from a UKRI point of view, is to join things up better. Part of my enthusiasm for these more flexible and dynamic career paths is precisely to get people moving between the industrial research base and other parts of the research system, to create that really networked set of activities, so that both the ideas and the people who have them are properly joined up and move through the system in a way that allows adoption and diffusion as quickly as possible for new ideas that crop up. So building those bridges, well, it's not even bridges, it's just fully joining up the whole system, which I think is largely about people and them moving, is a critical part of this. And we're back to information flow over distances and self-organisation.
Getting rid of the big brain, getting rid of the central brain. Yeah, okay. Yeah. I do want at some point bring it back to we've just had a complete restructure, and the department you report into is changing. Mm-hmm. So it'd be interesting to come back to what you think that means, really. Yep. But there's a question up there from Dubs.
Yep. Hi. I was lucky enough in the early noughties to be very involved with some very fast-moving industry, including helping put that tablet in your hand. And what I saw then was a lot of productisation at a very early stage, people making experiments and doing things. Now we've got a very different financial format now, where a lot of people are much more scared about investment because of various things which have happened financially over the last probably 10 years, let alone the last 2. And I think there's less need to do that, and lots of companies are a bit, let's take things steady. How do we take this science and very quickly productise it? Because when I've seen that happen, I've seen very quick movements from quite chunky products which don't really suit consumers to things which really get science into people's hands. I'm just wondering what could happen what structure do we need to change to try and speed that up, to get productisation right onto the edge of science rather than at a distance?
Gosh, and that's a big question. And I think it's very sector specific, actually. There are quite a lot of areas where that kind of later stage development becomes extremely expensive. So if you've got any kind of difficult manufacturing process and you need to prototype it and all of that, but very, very expensive, need a lot of investment, venture capital investment. And then a part of the blocker is having that high risk capital in a way that is easy to get hold of. And a lot of the issues we've had in this country has resulted in the venture capital community having less expertise in science and technology than in some other places, and then being reluctant to invest, and rules for pension investors being such that. So I guess there's a strand of work on the investor community in some places. In other places, if you think about how quickly you can get a really extraordinary app into people's hands, very short R&D path, and from that point of view, the risk profile is just completely different. The other thing I want to mention, we were talking about this beforehand, in that there is a new department, and it's the Department for Science, Innovation and Technology, and so a number of people are saying, what about the arts and humanities? A lot of the part you're talking about is essentially about design and about understanding people and how they interact with things. And so, to me, that's also critical to embed that thinking. If you really want to get things into people's hands that they want and that they want to use, then you need to think about it in a much more holistic way. And that also is something that can kind of drop off the end of some companies' thinking, which I think also slows things down. So it's a really interesting and complex question that I think depends very heavily on which part of the system you're looking at.
I think there's kind of, we were talking about the, because if you go down to the sports hall, you see a lot of STFC, so one of the research councils that's now part of UKRI. But actually there's things like Arts Humanities Research Council, there's things like Economic and Social Research Council, and they almost sometimes feel like an invisible underpinning layer across all of it, don't they? And you don't necessarily see it, but actually the stuff they're showing has all been done with creative sector, creative industries, to actually bring that storytelling, to understand how people engage. So actually, it is more of a network than here are some silos for different bits. Peter, could you be a roving mic for me? Thank you very much. I think we can hear everyone, but actually it's just so it picks up for the live stream for anyone who's online.
I think the other thing about that is that those parts of the research and innovation system, the whole thing is way more joined up than it used to be. So you mentioned the creative industries, incredibly high tech. Lots of AI and stuff going into that. And the economic and social science is very, very data driven these days. And again, lots of really high tech analytical tools going into thinking about a lot of those key questions. So it's brilliant that UKRI exists precisely because it makes it much easier to get that join up to work well and to ensure that we don't allow the silos that history have put in to inhibit our ability to use those things to solve the problems we need to solve.
I think the next Rude Science is showing some families running onto it. So who's next question?
I don't think I'll need that.
Well,
Very late.
no, it's more for the people who are streaming. So if you could use the microphone, thank you. And then I'll come to this. Who else had questions so I can make sure I don't miss you? Yeah, okay.
Can you hear that? Yeah.
Yep.
The only thing I wanted to add there, going back to the pandemic, it took everything from scientists right down to volunteers to solve the problem. And sometimes we forget that everyone is just as important. And this show today that we've got here highlights that very clearly, because we have some very clever people here that know an awful lot, but without the volunteers, and I think there's over 40 of them today, without those volunteers, this wouldn't happen. So it is a case of everything being inclusive. The only other thing I would add to what you said, I never had the chance to go to university. I left school at 14. But I did dozens of different jobs. I served champagne to the Queen and I dug trenches. I think I've been to the University of Life.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Do you have a question?
I guess building on the sort of government department theme, we hear pieces about a certain reluctance to engage with experts in certain ministers and certain departments. For two questions, so do you perceive that, is that just media, or does that really happen? And if it does happen, how do you manage it?
I don't think there's a reluctance to engage with experts. I think the sort of very famous Michael Gove quote, if you extend it a bit, it makes much more sense. And what he complains about is that people are sick of experts telling you that they know what's right and then being wrong. Now, it's perfectly fine to be wrong. I don't have any problem with that.
I'm wrong a lot.
It's a normal part of research and innovation, as we heard, to be wrong continually. What I think is critical is that thing about being told. I think that notion that there is a person over here who knows, and you're someone who doesn't know, and you need to be told. That's the real problem that we need to tackle, because you can't know the solution unless you also listen. And we're back now to the importance of everybody in the system and transforming tomorrow together. It's not about telling people, it's not about it's not about kind of lobbing solutions out of the lab over some big wall into the world. Those solutions will not be the right solutions. The products that you make will not be used and accepted unless we join that whole thing up. I don't think anybody has a problem with expertise. Everybody knows that some people know things and other people know other things, and we need all of those things together to find the best solutions. It's how you deploy that expertise in the way that properly create solutions that everybody can buy into. That's the critical point. And I'm quite encouraged actually by the kind of shift in narrative as we move into the creation of this new department, which is very much about delivering for people, for the economy, for our society. I've always struggled a little bit, I've got to say, with the science superpower narrative, because it's easy to map that into the, don't worry, science will save us kind of Buzz Lightyear mode, which is not what we need. And I have happily redefined science superpower in my mind as a society that is both powered and empowered by science. It's got to be that together for everybody, with everybody, by everybody narrative to work. And in that model, I'm completely for it. So it's about this harnessing expertise in the service of society. That's really what we need to do.
Yeah, I think when you started, I wanted to correct you. And then you corrected yourself. But I think that when you said that some of the narrative is good, and you were saying about it's science for everyone, for society. And I was like, isn't it with? Isn't it with? And then you just used with afterwards, so it was fine.
Totally with.
Yeah, and I think that is the with is the important thing. I think for me, and I think I always harp back to it. This idea that I think now there's estimate, it's probably out of date already, that on average we see 9,000 marketing messages a day. And we are treated and bombarded like consumers all day, every day. And then it becomes the same with politicians, by my policy, my party, and my truth. And then with the expertise, it comes the same way, by my truth about pandemic, by my truth about this. And getting away from that kind of, we're telling you we're right because we've got the better expertise, we're the superpowers, we're the top of the league of the science world, and making it more actually a more, you use better words actually, but yeah, that kind of, that with that actually we are the agency, so giving everyone the agency to be part of this, and we're not telling you stop using plastic bottles because we know that's the right thing to save the world. It's like, actually, what are we going to do?
Exactly.
And what power do we have as people?
Yeah. I think the other side to that's perhaps less visible is the extent to which that's really important for the quality of the research and innovation that we're doing, and also for the kind of mental health of researchers and innovators. It's quite lonely doing research, actually. If you think it's just you and you're kind of stepping into the unknown, you have no idea what you're going to find. Probably it won't work. You probably won't find anything. It's quite a scary thing to do by yourself. But if you know you're doing it as part of a national and international endeavour, and there are people with you helping you, and you've got their ideas to listen to and to feed in, as well as yours, and collectively you're going to get there, that it creates a much healthier research environment, as well as breaking down the barriers we currently have between that research environment and everybody else. It's very much a two-way thing, and I think that's very important that scientists step into that space with that in the front of their minds, rather than I'm going to meet some people and information will be exchanged. It's a community thing, at least as much as an information thing.
Didn't Stephen Hawking's PhD thesis turn out to be he'd got it wrong, or he completely changed his opinions on stuff based on? So it's kind of there is that kind of permission to be wrong thing, which when you're a lonely scientist and you're kind of dependent on your next grant or promotion, and the world looking at your research and going. So yeah, I think that it does give much more permission to actually find the right thing and change your direction if it is a joint thing. Are there more questions?
Thank you. So the question I've got is kind of going back to one of the themes you've already touched upon in terms of how to change the public's and the government's perception of togetherness in, broadly speaking, understanding and funding research and innovation to specifically sort of break down the sort of divisions between disciplines, or enable more collaborations between what we call STEM and arts, humanities and social sciences. Because we're here today at the Festival of Tomorrow, and if you look around, there's one bookstore and that's it. There's nothing else that would indicate that actually to tackle those challenges and make tomorrow better, those societal challenges that the video was talking about, that you were talking about earlier, there is a need for expertise of social sciences, historians. Who's the first person to imagine a tomorrow? It's the playwright or the poet or the writer. So how could we better facilitate those kind of collaborations?
So, I mean, there are lots of fantastic examples of exactly those kinds of collaborations. I don't think there is inherently any barrier to them. And again, the existence of UKRI has made that easier in a whole variety of ways. And as I mentioned earlier, I think the boundaries between disciplines is increasingly very, very fuzzy. And an interesting aspect to that is the thing that in some ways is rising up the agenda is technology as a concept. So if digital technologies completely transformed our society, and they're everywhere in the arts and humanities and social sciences, in the engineering and all the rest of it. And they become then quite kind of unifying, and also create opportunities to bring things together in different kinds of ways. So there's really a multi-dimensional thing in research and innovation, and I'm mostly interested in getting rid of barriers, in creating places, ways of thinking, ways of talking about this societally, where people don't think about their identity as a thing, and they don't then come into that space and think, how does my identity interact with the rest of this? They don't, and until we have that, I don't think we'll actually make the best of those kinds of collaborative things. While people are still asking, what about this discipline, or what about this whatever, and then what it tells me is we haven't yet managed to make an environment where everybody feels welcome and everybody's ideas feel that they need to be kind of part of the mix, knowing full well that most of those ideas will be wrong and will be rejected. It's coming together with that full open-mindedness and collaborative understanding of all of the ideas that's so important, which involves everybody being happy to be told that they're wrong, as well as everybody being happy to listen to other people's ideas. I've sort of zoomed out, but it's important because as soon as you lock back down to what about this set of people or what about that set of people, I think you're in danger of re-erecting the barrier that the whole point you're trying to dismantle.
Yeah, and it's an interesting thing for like programming for an event like this. or it's more, you end up with it's bigger than the 2 days, of course. And you do kind of go, well, people always say, what's the theme? What theme are you doing this year? And I go, I'm not doing a theme this year. We're doing everything, and anyone can play, really. And then you go, we haven't got enough. You do go, I haven't got enough medicine, or I haven't got enough, and you do start siloing immediately, and what's not represented.
Yeah.
And some of it you kind of, deliberately trying to do things, but then we just give platforms to others, and some things rise up, some things, more of one than the other. And my kind of, well, we've got artists and we've got musicians, but then I kind of go, I'm actually maybe siloing them over there, aren't I? Or so it's how. I think you're absolutely right. We had Prime Theatre delivering our science engagement this week, and that was quite good. But yeah, I don't know how we tackle the breaking down the words which we use to define things, which then divide things. Or maybe you do.
Precisely. That starts with the English language and the fact that we have those separate terms, the science and the social sciences and the humanities. Whereas if anyone in the room speaks German, for example, Wissenschaft is a concept that encompasses everything holistically. So Kulturwissenschaft would be the sort of cultural sciences within this wider thing. Nauka in Polish by the same token, and so on. So it's how, I guess, from sort of primary school level, very, very early in the pipeline, how we're being taught to think in this country is maybe translating into those barriers then existing, and so perhaps it's about more people learning languages to help them collaborate.
Although the German system is much more divided than the UK system in the end. They segregate people very early into strands, so I don't think having a word necessarily
with vocational
helps
education
you.
and so on.
Yeah,
Yes.
and the technical stuff and so different cultures, different. It's about difference. There is no right way to do it, precisely because what you're trying to do is create environments where different kinds of ideas are welcome. And that's very hard from a human point of view. We don't really want to be challenged in that way. We want people to agree with us. And the whole point about research and innovation is to welcome disagreement. So it's how you give people the support almost to enjoy when somebody says, no, you're wrong.
Yes. Pete, could you run up?
Hi. I'm very relieved to hear your views on science and the way you see it. And I am a lawyer. And I'm just interested to hear how science will bring sort of the people into the decision making and to be part of this togetherness. From a lawyer's point of view, I would say, if something doesn't work well with science and society, it will end up in court, and courts will sort of adjust it somehow. In AI, I think we're looking more towards ethics and AI, and would we have to regulate AI, as a way to sort of bring society's values and interests in AIs, so I'm just kind of thinking, I guess, also from a zoomed out perspective is, do we regulate, how do we bring science in? Because yes, I agree with your views and I think they're excellent, but society is affected, and we are a big part of the conversation. So I'm just trying to work out how that would.
Yeah, that's another very excellent and multi-layered question. So in the long term, it would be lovely if the research and innovation system was so fully woven across society that it was sort of inherent, that it moved forward with people and by people. So fewer of these kind of crunch moments happened when suddenly there's a technology that's massively impacting us, and then we start thinking about it. So it would be great if it was earlier. Some of the things we're trying to do from that point of view is to put some of our funding into community networks. So not funding researchers and innovators, funding communities to build their collective opportunities, I suppose, to work out what they think and what they want, and how they could be part of a research enabled society or community, and then we can learn from people. So trying to properly build that sense of agency to give people money to try to work through that. But that's a kind of really long-term objective at the other end. Yes, AI is here now, and we absolutely need to think about how to ensure that it's used in a way that aligns with our values and properly delivers for our society in a positive way, so that both the benefits and the risks are equitably distributed, and the benefits are maximised and the risks are minimised. It's a challenge. What's the role of regulation? There is often a role for regulation in achieving those things. In my experience, it is unusual that the correct thing to do is to regulate the technology, because particularly those technologies have millions of applications. And if you try to regulate the entire technology, you will almost inevitably have unintended consequences. So a good example in AI, there's a lot of concern that AI, from a kind of machine learning point of view, that learn from data, they'll have biases in the data. And so some of the biases we have in our society will be amplified by the fact that the decision-making that comes out of AI is based on existing biases in the data. So then you could say, we're going to regulate in a way that gets rid of those biases in the data in some way. And so you can't use AI in a way that discriminates against people of different genders, for example. But then, what if you want to do a medical AI? It makes no sense whatsoever to ban gender differences as a model in a medical context. It's absurd. So it's very, very difficult with general purpose technologies to regulate in a way that is actually ethical and aligns with people's values across all of the things. So then you wind up needing to think about what you're actually trying to achieve. It's an outcomes-based regulatory system. And I think those are usually much more robust also to ongoing changes in the technology. So regulation is important, but how you do it, absolutely critical, precisely to get the maximum benefit and the minimum harms out of those technologies. There is a slight danger, I think, to reach for blanket regulation across the whole technology that actually in the end achieves neither of those things.
So I think we're coming to the end of the time. So what we want to do with the festival is create more of a platform for some of the levels of that agency. And so hopefully you see that with some of the exhibitors. I have no idea what I have some idea. But these people are showing what they're talking about. And you'll see more of the panels. And we've got a teenager who's chairing a panel tomorrow. And actually it's about more people having voice and more people leading discussions. This is the only time I'm on stage in the 2 days. One thing, what different mechanisms people are looking at to kind of create that, how do we have that togetherness? And nothing's perfect yet, but lots of people look at different ways. And one of the ways is things like citizens' assemblies. And if you're around tomorrow afternoon, it's something that's going to be a little bit more high profile later. They're kind of here early in the kind of process. But there's a session called the Wild Isles in People's Plan for Nature. And so Wild Isles is actually a BBC broadcast with David Attenborough, but collaborating with RSPB and others, and then the People's Plan for Nature is that kind of bringing it together, creating a citizen assembly to go, actually, what do we do to tackle biodiversity? Partly a result of going, we're not sure government is necessarily going in the right direction. I think that's where it started, to be honest. But actually, it then said, actually, whether they are or not, it's more about agency. The people of the UK should be thinking about how we look after biodiversity and what our plans should be. And so that is a process that's just kicking off. And so this will be a very, very early kind of session to feed into that tomorrow afternoon. So I do recommend, if you care about the future of biodiversity, go and have your take part in that panel tomorrow afternoon. But lots of opportunities. We're probably out of time now. I just want to thank you again, Professor Dame Ottoline Leyser, to give you there's probably even more I could add to that, but probably enough. So everyone, thank you very much.
Thank you, wonderful audience.
And yeah, thank you for, I don't like to call you audience because frankly you're participants, but thank you for participating.
Absolutely.
And please carry on. Thank you.